Okay, the meeting will come to order. This is the time and place set for the Utility Financial Oversight Committee. Could we call the roll and determine if we have a quorum?
Chairperson Johnston.
Sorry, was that me?
Yeah.
Yes. Present.
Member Turchek.
Present.
Member Bathgate. Member Connect. Member Johns.
Present.
A quorum is present.
Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anyone here for public comment? Okay, let the record reflect no one is present for public comment. Item 4, public meeting items. Item 5A, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding electing a chairperson and vice chairperson for the Utility Finance Oversight Committee.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair. Gotta hit number 4 first on the agenda.
Oh, approval of the minutes.
Thank you.
Skipped right over. Yeah. Committee member Connect has arrived. So,
Thank you, sir. It's good to be here with you all. But I can't make the motion for approval of the minutes because I missed that meeting. With apologies.
nor can I. Item 4, which I managed to skip right over here, is approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move to approve the April 4th, 2022 meeting minutes of the Utility Finance Oversight Committee.
Do we have a
Second.
do we have a second? Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Right, the minutes are approved. Now we get to item 5. Item 5A, discussion possible action regarding electing a chairperson and vice chairperson for the Utility Finance Oversight Committee.
Yes,
And
Andy Hummel, wastewater utility manager for the record. Each calendar year, this committee will have a chair and vice chair. I believe last year the chair was Randy Bowling, who with Stan going off of the board, that was his nominee. Now we have Ronald Johns on for Curtis Horton. So that leaves you as the acting chair, I believe. But here's your chance. Any questions?
That, as I said, that'll teach me to miss a meeting. I read the minutes and I was vice chair. Wait a minute. But
Mr. Chairman, I one time missed a meeting of an organization I was a member of, and my just desserts were they elected me president. So don't miss meetings.
my mic on here. Let's start with chairperson. Do we have any nominations for chairperson for 2023, upcoming year?
I would like to nominate the current chair. I see. What do I call you? The current vice chair or chair?
I believe I'm the acting chair, but current vice chair.
Okay. Well, then I move to nominate the current acting chair.
Anyone else wish to be chair of this august committee during the upcoming year? And I will say I will accept for this year. And All in favor of myself, Robert Johnston, being chair for the upcoming year, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so be it. I'm now the real chair, not the acting chair. Moving on to vice chairperson for the committee. Do we have any nominations for vice chair of the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I nominate Jim Bathgate. He's a pretty good guy.
Do we have a second for that nomination?
I'll second that nomination.
Any other nominees for vice chair person? Okay, all in favor of Jim Bathgate being the vice chairperson, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Am I supposed to vote on that? Aye.
It's unanimous. Mr. Bathgate will be vice chairperson. Moving on to item 5B, discussion and possible action regarding the tentative fiscal year 2024 wastewater fund budget, its compliance with adopted financial policies, and a recommendation of the Board of Supervisors regarding the tentative wastewater fund budget for fiscal year 2024. Who's taking the lead on this one?
Good afternoon. Jamie Stevenson, Accounting Manager for the record. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Courtney Nicholas back in the audience. She is our fiscal analyst at Public Works. She does a lot of the work to get these budgets prepared, and I really appreciate all of her help.
Can I ask a favor?
Of course.
I forgot to put in my ears. Can you speak directly into the mic and speak up?
Yes.
Thank
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. All right. There are a few things I want to mention up front that apply to all three of the utility funds. For budgeting revenue, we have included our scheduled rate increases that will be effective July 1st of 2023. Also, across all three funds, salaries and benefits include our annual contractual increases and an estimated 10% increase to health insurance. We are also including the announced PERS rate increase in those salaries and benefits. Our non-operating income consists mostly of investment income, and we always try and budget conservatively. For the wastewater fund, we have an increase of $191,691 over estimated fiscal year 2023 with our contractual increases and those benefit rate increases I mentioned. However, I would like to take this opportunity to let you know of an addition that we already are aware we're going to be making to the budget. I didn't have the information at the time when I prepared this regarding a few employees who are going to receive some certifications next year and are eligible for promotion. Adding that amount would be, I'm going to be adding $33,953 to salaries and benefits. I plan to add that to the budget that will be presented to the Board of Supervisors in April. And that will make our total salaries and benefits increase $232,770 instead of the $191,691 that you see on the slide. I went ahead and included that increase in the financial goal calculations, and when you add that increase in, we still meet all of our goals. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, should we ask questions as we go or save it until the end of the presentation? You have
Let's
that.
see, I guess my preference, and I'm happy to hear voices from the committee, but My preference would be to wait until we have the wastewater fund highlights and then take all questions on that.
Okay.
Same with water and
Great,
stormwater.
thank you.
Okay, budgeted services and supplies decreased $645,896 over estimated fiscal year 2023. Those decreases can be attributed to our internal service charges, which are part of the citywide cost allocation plan. We had decreases to chemicals and facility and equipment repair and maintenance. Our planned capital outlay for fiscal year 2024 is $5,395,000. And here is a listing of those planned capital expenditures over the next 5 years. Okay, and on to our financial policy compliance. With this slide, you can see that the wastewater utility fund budget for fiscal year 2024 meets all of the city's adopted financial policy requirements. The line graphs represent the financial goals, and the vertical bar graphs represent the projected cash balances. Industry standards for the wastewater fund require an operating reserve of 30 to 45 days minimum of operating expenses. Capital reserve goal is calculated at 2% of capital assets. The system reinvestment funding goal is equal to 80% of depreciation. The debt to equity ratio goal is at least 50-50, and the debt service coverage ratio goal is 1.0 or above. And that concludes my presentation on the wastewater fund. I'll open it up to questions.
Questions from the committee? Mr. Connect.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's go back to page 17 and onward through the wastewater fund and the others. Just a general comment. When I was controller, I used to emphasize the long-term in the controller's annual report. We did comparisons back as far as we could get comparable data, which last time we did that was from 2006 to 2018. Of course, the comprehensive annual financial report tends to focus on year over year, as your budget papers do here. But I think next year, when you make this presentation, it would be helpful to see longer-term series data, at least at the higher levels, not at the finest level of resolution. The other thing on the wastewater fund highlights at page 17 that would be helpful, this tends to reflect, it reflects operating revenue and sort of the internal viewpoint of salaries and benefits, change and services, et cetera. What would be really helpful there is to have the capital improvement totals the way we have, or some version of it on the summary there, the way we have operating revenue and services and supplies and outlay, et cetera. Now, we do eventually get to that, but I thought that was an important thing because the 2023 capital improvement budget or numbers were really high, and that's something that I think we'd want to highlight. Anyway, moving on to the page 20, fiscal expenditures. Down there toward the bottom, we've got capital outlay, and there we've got 20,563,000, et cetera, for 2022, 2023 versus much lower figures before and after. And we're going to get into that just a little bit. My first question on that page is, Is our fiscal,
Can
am I getting
No,
ahead?
no, yes, Jamie, could you pull that slide up? Just so we could all look at it, that was all.
Oh, yeah. Page 20. If I'm getting ahead of us, let me know.
So Pam Ganger, Deputy CFO, that item is not one of her slides, but she can pull up that schedule as she's doing right now for you.
That item, I'm sorry.
Is not one of her slides,
Oh, well,
but she can pull it up. It is in your materials, so she's pulling it up for you. I just wanted you to know it wasn't in the PowerPoint.
okay. Most of these data throughout are presented on a calendar year basis. And then we've got this one that's presented on what I think is a fiscal year basis. Is our fiscal year from July 1st to June 30th?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So when you start mixing them, it gets a little hard to track from page to page, but I just wanted to be sure about that. The rest of my questions essentially are some details on pages 23 through 27. And if that's ripe at this point, I'll ask those questions, and if not, I'll wait till we get there.
I just wanted to make a clarification there. All the information presented is fiscal year based, not calendar year.
I'm
Was-
sorry, say.
All the fiscal information presented is based on our fiscal year, not
Good.
calendar year.
Okay.
Okay. You had mentioned something was calendar year. Was there a misunderstanding on one of the pages?
Well, I just wasn't sure because we have, we don't label at 23 through 27, we don't label the columns as fiscal year or calendar year. Not that it matters too much to, to my questions, but it would help, you know, if you said FY or CY or something like that. Should I continue?
No, well, let me ask the staff here, is this the right person to answer Committee Member Connect's detailed questions on these items on page 23?
I'm happy to try to answer your questions, and Public Works staff will help if they need to.
We'll be happy to have your answers and
Okay.
supplement by anybody else. I'm not trying to play ambush games here.
No
I'm just
problem.
trying to lay a good record to show the public what we've done and that we've done our due diligence as a committee and that you all have got all the answers as staff. So at page 23, the first thing is we've got the 2023 revised budget, then we've got 2023 actuals, by which I presume you mean to date actuals. And then we've got the 2023 estimated, which is re-estimated based on experience so far. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that is correct. The estimated, or the actuals column is through about mid-January when we started working on our budgets.
Okay. The third line there says fixed capitalization. Most of these other things were clear to me, but what is fixed capitalization?
That is a revenue for, is it, I don't know if I,
It's a very substantial amount.
yes.
And it's obviously revenues because it's got the
Correct.
parentheses, but
The user fees are the ones, the revenues that are for usage. And I believe the fixed capitalization, I might need Public Works to help me answer that one.
Yeah, we can grab perhaps Andy up here to help answer that question, but that's how the line items are detailed out on the bills that go out to customers.
I don't look at my bill. I let my wife pay that.
Hi, Darren Schultz, Public Works Director. For the record, I don't know that we can offer much more than finance, other than the monthly bills, invoices that go out. This is the revenue that is coming in from that, the total revenue for wastewater in this case, and it's just divided up separately between the two. So
I understand that. By the way, 20-plus years ago, when I was the first chairman of this committee, we did the advice to the supervisors on rate increases and rate structure, and I've been involved in one of those since then. And I do understand the fixed versus variable portions, but basically what you're saying is that that's the part of the bill that it represents a fixed cost and not a variable cost with the meter usage.
that's right. That's
Okay.
right.
I feel foolish asking this question, but 4 lines down and thereafter, what is UB?
UB stands for utility billing,
Ah, okay. Good.
and there's no foolish questions, so ask away.
So in lines 5 through about 10 or so, right-of-way toll, other charges and fees, in previous years, we've gotten in 2021, 2022, we've gotten substantial revenues there. And now for the current year and for the tentative 2024 budget, we have a bunch of zeros. Why are we not anticipating any revenues in those areas?
That right-of-way toll revenue gets transferred to the general fund on June 30th every year. So we will not, even though the revenues are there, in the actuals right now, they'll be transferred to the general fund. So they're not going to be contributing to our total revenue.
So if I understand you right, from basically right-of-way toll down to to storm water UB, basically that's going to the general fund?
Just the right-of-way toll is going to the general fund.
Oh.
The other items are an internal entry that is done every year at the end of the year. We look back at the, that's the office space rental, right? I believe it is. Yeah, so what we're doing here is we are charging other funds across the city who are using the wastewater funds assets. They're using the buildings. And so we are charging rent to those other departments. And so
Okay.
this is recorded. It's a closing year entry that I do at the end of the year.
That's not really a subsidy either way. That's that's essentially allocating your costs to people, to other departments that get the benefits.
Yes, but it is separate from our cost allocation plan.
Right.
Yes, it's to charge for the usage of the space.
This, by the way, I'm sure you recognize, is an issue that the mayor has brought up. When, for example, once upon a time, I think a very large, I want to say it was a snowplow truck, was being charged to other departments because the snowplow would provide access to the manholes, et cetera. And I'll be frank, this is a concern of mine that basically all departments pay exactly their cost, and that nobody subsidizes another one way or the other. And in particular, long ago, the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power, under their city council, basically started using higher water and sewer and utility charges, enterprise charges, to subsidize the general funds so they didn't have to raise taxes. And to me, that is a real problem. If they're going to provide services, incur costs, et cetera, they should be allocated where they belong. So, moving on to, oops, sorry about that. Moving on to page 24, about the 8th and 9th lines, we've got OPEB, that's other pensions and benefits, I think, cost, and the pension cost. And there was a substantial revenue for OPEB in 21 and 22, on the order of not quite 400,000, and similar amount, at least for 22 for pensions. And now we're not showing revenue, we're showing net costs there for this year and next year. Why is that? And I apologize for one thing. Had I gotten this together earlier, I would have called you to let you know what my questions were, because I don't want to play ambush games here.
No.
I just went through this in at least wastewater in some detail, and these are the questions that occurred to me.
Okay, so the OPEB and pension costs are expenses that are required by, they're an accounting standard, because we have to record the large liability for our OPEB and our pension plans. So we have to record the expense each year, and I know that in fiscal year 2022, there's actually a big, would it be a loss to or a decrease?
Big credit? Or?
Yes, to the liability. And so we got to, the expense went the other way.
So, can you think of a reason why we benefited that way from it? Was it something the legislature did, or?
I don't remember specifically off the top of my head what the reason was that year. We do hire a third party to prepare these adjustments for us. So I without researching why, I don't remember off the top of my head why a couple years back we had those credits. But it is a GASB standard.
Sure.
So that's what we're following here with those adjustments.
I understand that. Let me just explain on that. As a former state employee, fully vested after 10 years, and as controller, I've been very concerned about the pension management by our friends at PERS. So I tend to see those items, and they ring a bell. We've got auditing costs just below that of on the order of $20,000 a year. Is that for an outside auditor to basically review the books and approve them, or and if so, who is that, or what are those costs about?
Yes, those are our auditing fees for our annual audit. Our auditors are currently, what's their names? I forgot. I'm drawing a blank on their names too. I just wrote it the other day.
Actually, $20,000 a year on that kind of audit does not strike me as problematic at all. I would hope that we are changing auditors every 3, 4, or 5 years.
Yes, sir.
That's a good practice.
We do go out to bid every 3 years.
Thank you. Okay, let's drop down to the middle of the page, and you'll see infrastructure repair and maintenance. Since we're an oversight committee, I feel obligated to ask even about historic costs. It went up from 19,000, hopefully not 19 million, to 83,000 from 21 to 22, and now back to we're projecting the 50,000 range. Why has it gone up so much, and how did we come to 50,000 going forward? And it may be more to the point, infrastructure repair and maintenance, can you explain that item to me just a little bit?
Yes, Andy Hummel, wastewater utility manager. For the record, the infrastructure repair and maintenance, that budget line item is basically smaller repairs on our system. They'll get used quite extensively, like we need to go replace a valve or a short piece, small break on our effluent reuse system.
So that would be one of those things that's really hard to estimate.
Yeah.
It just happens as it happens when something needs fixing or improving or whatever. And so we use a nice round figure in the middle going forward.
Yeah, yep. Just
Okay.
try to-
Drop
something
down
is-
2 lines there. Effluent at the golf course, what is EV?
That is Eagle Valley.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting point. I was out at Mr. Millard's course the other day, and I noticed there was a new water hazard on the first fairway. In fact,
Yeah.
it covered the whole fairway.
Yes.
Which brings up this question. I believe you said the actuals here basically reflect experience through about January something. So did you all anticipate all the rain and snow we've been getting? And how abnormal is this year going to be because of that?
We will touch on that in our manager updates. We've got a number of slides of just how much, this has been, but we'll say we had about a 33% heads up from the National Weather Service that this was coming. Yeah.
That's the downside
Yep.
of the good, of the upside, that we needed the water.
Yep. Normally it's 50-50. It's going to be wet or it's going to be dry, and this year it was wet, drier in the middle.
Okay. Below that, in the bottom third or quarter of the page, postage and shipping, laboratory expenses, heating, and also up there, chemicals. Well, we'll get to chemicals in a minute. That's separate, but postage and shipping, laboratory expenses, and heating. Again, it seems we had lower numbers in 21 and 22, higher this year, and sort of back to we're projecting from this year going forward. Why would, for example, our postage and shipping or laboratory expenses, et cetera, why would they increase as much as they have? And that's not a one-time thing, apparently. Why is it that high going forward?
The postage and shipping is largely our monthly bills, anything that gets mailed out, and then any special mailers that we do. So if we want to, send some mailing out to a certain group in the city, something like that, that'll hit the budget that year. Kind of depends on what the hot topic is that year. Let's say this year we've had a lot of mailings to the southeast area of the city with our septic conversion project down there. So we've been sending out a lot more than normal.
Okay. And the chemicals amount is a large amount. It went up from 416 to 518 to 684 and stays at that level. Is this something to do with the current economic situation and chemicals and the supply chain, or what is that about?
It is a lot to do supply chain, especially through COVID. The one chemical we saw a lot of price variability was bleach. Our disinfectant at the treatment plant, water uses it as well. I can tell you in the last 4 or 5 years since I've started, it's doubled the cost on that. It has, we're anticipating another big jump in January, and it went up like 3 cents. So we think it's kind of stabilized.
Okay. It's hard times.
Yeah.
Can I jump in real quick right
Yeah.
there? I was just gonna ask a question about that, because on the slide 17, there was a decrease by 645,000 and some change. And it said internal service charges, chemicals, facility and equipment, repair and maintenance. So I was actually gonna ask about that, because I was curious since I knew chemicals have gone up so much.
For fiscal year '24, we reduced the 684,000 that we had in fiscal year '23 to 584. So that was part of our, we had an overall decrease.
Decrease, okay. So,
With other expenses.
okay. So even though it's listed as chemicals, it's still like decrease for
Did
Yeah.
I,
overall.
what did I say?
Yeah, we buy numerous chemicals under that budget.
Okay,
Polymer is another large cost at the treatment plant. That one has stayed stable. We were
okay,
anticipating this year it was going to go way up.
okay.
Mr. Knecht, would you mind if I jumped in? Because I
Oh,
had a question on
please do, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, on that internal service charges, was there a change in the allocation process among the cities as to what share? I'm assuming that's an allocation, correct? Was there a change in that worked to your benefit or your department's benefit this time?
Yes, there was a decrease in internal service charges. The city's cost allocation plan, we have a consultant who, she looks at all, or she speaks with and works with all the departments to find out what they use as far as the finance team, the treasurer's office, human resources, IT, and they allocate that cost across all the departments. So since the wastewater fund did have a decrease in internal service charges this year from prior year.
And that was the bulk of that, 645, 645?
Yes, in fiscal year '23, the cost was $1,549,000. And in fiscal '24, we're looking at $1,352,000.
Thank you. And let's see, Mr. Connector, you didn't mean to interrupt your flow, or you?
Oh, that's,
Okay.
there's not a lot of flow here. It's rapids is what it is. Anyway, on page 25, about 1/3 of the way down, under capital improvements, we have groundwater protection, which is capitalized, and that goes from 0 to 100,000 this year to 50,000 in the 2024. What caused that? Was that Mr. Millard's water hazard out on the first fairway?
No, that is tied historically to our septic conversion program that's been going on since the late 90s.
Okay.
So that line item, when there's a certain time frame that once the sewer line is in front of the house and the homeowner would connect, connection fees would be waived. This would be where that cost would come out of for those connection fees. So we haven't had any for the last several years, but that project is being kicked back off, so we should see it in the coming years. That should start getting used again.
Okay. Thank you. And a couple or 4 or 5 lines below that, we've got facility improvements and vehicle replacement program, which had significant or some amounts in '21, nothing in '22, and then ballooned to 144 and 523 this year, and for next year is projected at 250 and 775. What's going on there that we've gone from some very modest amounts to some significant, substantial amounts?
Yeah, on the facility improvements line, a lot of that is just availability of materials. We've had to kind of push some projects, that's starting to loosen up. So we're anticipating this next year is going to be busier. The vehicle replacement program, that's 775 this coming year. We have a new, we call it a camel. It's basically a big vacuum truck. So it goes and cleans the sewer lines, sucks that debris out. The current machine is about 14 years old and is really starting to show its age. So vehicle replacement, especially for a smaller utility like this, that number is going to bounce quite a bit, whether it's everything's great or we need a pickup this year or something big like that.
Well, first of all, it comes in lumps.
Yep.
Especially with the
Yep.
Camel.
Yep.
And secondly, our family has 2 vehicles and we replace them about every 15 years. And it's a big lump for us too. Okay, that's helpful. Dropping down to the capital improvements listing at the bottom, which is detailed in the gray background. Here again, 1.78 mil in 21, 2.34 mil in 22. Oh my, 13,604,000 or 606 by the time we finish this year, down, and then back down to 4.1 million. The reason I ask about this, and it's of course detailed below, but can you give me a characterization for the record of why we have such large capital improvements, something that the average resident would understand, that can help, explain that non-trend?
I'll take a stab at it. So we have, in fiscal year '23, in the current year, we have a lot of projects that have been ongoing. So every year I make the budget for the next year. And so next year we've got a 4 million, and those are new projects. So these projects that we're currently working on, at the end of the year, most of them will not be done. And so in our first round of budget augmentations, I will roll forward that budget into the next year. So that's part of why you see it change, and it looks so big in the prior year because we need the money available for those projects.
Okay, that's helpful. On the next page, the top half of it, continuing the gray background stuff, again, a question I probably should know the answer to, but what is WRRF? Wastewater, or what is that?
That is Water Resource Recovery Facility.
Thank you.
The treatment plant. Yep.
The third line is capital improvement again, which goes up basically to 663,000. And then there's electrical improvements, electrical improvements, 2 lines, construction and labor. And again, we're seeing some very large amounts there, 2.682 million, et cetera. And on down to warehouse, where those are 890,000, et cetera. And Eagle Station, those are all the lumpiness of our projects and the fact that this year we have the means basically left over to do some good projects, but of course we're being very tight-fisted about all that, right?
Yes, and that wharf electrical improvements, the one you pointed out there, that's another good example of one that has really delayed. It took almost a year of procurement just to get the parts. That one is finally almost finished now.
Was any of that delay due to COVID and lockdowns and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, it was largely that, and then transportation to get the materials moved around. Yep.
Okay. That's helpful. Excuse me. Dropping down to the bottom half of that page, so there we see the results, and we're going from 1.78 mil to 2.3 to 21.5, et cetera. But it's all in the details above. I think it would be helpful if on really salient items like that, if you would put a few footnotes to explain sort of the genesis of the changes as I've been asking you about. So now we got funding, sewer bonds, in and out. What is SRF bond?
State revolving fund.
State revolving,
Yep.
okay. And we go from zero amounts in costs for sewer bonds and state revolving funds to, $265,000, $230,000, $602,000, and $1.276 million. What kicked in this year in our bond funding costs?
Well, part of the reason that it looks a little strange is in the prior years, the city's debt fund handles all the bonds. And so we have the budget in the water fund because it's going to pay that, but then we transfer everything to the debt service fund. I may have said that wrong.
And I'll help Jamie out if she doesn't mind. What you're looking there at and basically all the lines that begin with in the second column there, 508, and then those are all the zeros in the prior years. That's principal bond payments. And as you know, principal reduces the actual liability. So we reclassify the expense to put it against the liability. And that's why you see zeros in prior years. So in the current years, and next year, you're looking at our principal bond payment. And then down below that is the interest.
Okay, so principal payments tend to be lumpy, unlike interest payments, basically. Okay. That, by the way, is a term economists use. Economists are not great at inventing obvious terms. Theirs are sort of clunky. Finally, on page 27, again, when you add it all up, here are the results. And that's why we go from 5.783 to 6065 to 23,290, et cetera. Okay, and back down to 7785 when life gets normal again. But what is the what are the little 7 lines there at the bottom to the right? Can you explain those to me?
That is our cash calculation. So we're looking at, we take the ending cash from the prior year, so this will be the ending cash from fiscal year '22, and we take out, or we add our revenue, we reduce it by our expenses, and then we add in our non-cash items to get our predicted cash balance at the end of the year.
Okay. And I did have a question previously and subsequently about cash flow. Mr. Chairman, I erred when I said page 27. Can I go through page 29?
Yep, Mr. Knack, how many more do you have? I just want to make
It's
sure.
it's not much.
Okay.
And I've only done this for the wastewater fund.
Okay,
My eyes glazed over by the end of that. So on page 28, we've got utility enterprises operating expense. Salaries and wages go up a little bit, and employee benefits went up greatly from 22 to 23. Why is that?
That is a result of those OPEB and pension costs that we talked about earlier.
Okay. And down there toward the bottom under capital contributions, I understand connection fees. Why did developers have to pay $786,000 through FY '22, and we're not seeing any more revenues from them this year or next year?
So that is actual assets that developers have built, so sewer lines essentially, and then get turned over to the city. So we have not, so since we're in 2023, that's why we don't have any there yet.
Okay.
Yes, that amount is given to me by our project management team at the end of the year. They work with the developers and find out what that amount is.
Okay, thank you. And finally, on page 29, couple of items. Under cash flows from operating activities, line A says net cash provided to or used for operating activities. And, you know, that's amounts essentially on the order of 8, 9, 10 million. The cash from operating activities, does that cover exactly and only our operating costs, or does it cover more or less? I stumped him.
So
That's more or less our operating costs right there.
Okay. And again, going back to my observation about cross-subsidy, it would be helpful to know that that covers exactly our operating expenses and not more or less. Final question before an observation. Net cash provided by or used for capital and related, and that goes from 4.6 mil to 23.7 and back down to 12. The 23.7 was because in that year we got all kinds of things done that had been deferred, and now the more more normal figure of 12 reflects that we don't have a lot of accrued problems that we have to deal with.
the biggest fluctuation there is the acquisition of capital assets.
Right.
And so that's those capital projects where we talked about the gray area.
Yeah.
So a lot of those projects, if they're not completed, you know, when we make our year-to-date actual at the end of the year, this number may not be nowhere near there depending on the progress of those projects, and that budget will roll forward into the next budget year.
Okay. And that leaves me with my final observation, which is on cash flow. Really problematic for any operation, any enterprise, but especially one that has various lumpy costs and revenues coming in. My overall question there is, in general, how much does the inflow equal the outflow by month, and or is it just not even that systematic? It just happens randomly. One month is more inflow and one month is more outflow. And how do we do our cash flow management in that regard? I know prayer is the first thing, but
Well, with this fund in particular, wastewater fund, the monthly revenues are pretty consistent because
Right.
there's usually a fixed cost to each of the bills. And I will show you, I'll go back to one of my PowerPoints.
Yeah, we've got a cash flow discussion there.
Well, I just wanted to point out that there's only 3 years of actual on here, but you can see that that cash balance has been growing each year. Public Works Management is really trying to ensure that the connection fees that are collected are being held for the next time we have a wastewater treatment plant improvement. They had some issues in the past with not having the capital on hand, and the rates, you know, the current ratepayers were funding some of the new development. And so you can see from this slide that we're really working hard on keeping that cash on hand for those big projects.
That has always been a concern to me, and especially going back 20-plus years when we first did this, and whenever it was, 10 years ago. As someone who for many years made his living as an economist, working for a utility regulatory agency, to me, the ratepayers funding things in advance was never a good idea and something to be avoided if possible. Now, when you're dealing with a really big utility like Sierra, what do they call themselves now, Nevada Energy, the lumpiness tends to sort of even out with many categories, but then again, you get a big power plant coming into service and they want to get ratepayers to pay a current cash return on construction work in progress and that sort of thing. So the advice I'm leaving you with and the question I'm leaving you with is, in view of all this and our inherent lumpiness, how can we, and this is advice to us and advice to the supervisors and to you're the management, how can we avoid not just the first thing I brought up, which is cross-subsidy among operations, but how can we also avoid having ratepayers essentially act as the financiers instead of ratepayers? And how can you, do you have any thoughts on how we can manage our year-to-year as well as month-to-month cash flow? Because I'm sure that's got to be a challenge for you all.
Well, I was just going to mention that we do have the bonds
Right.
as well. And
When we say equity versus debt, isn't equity sort of the ratepayer contribution here, and we use debt? And I think our policy is we're looking for more than 50% equity, which would, to my mind, be more than 50% ratepayer funding versus debt funding. And I think it should be the other way around. We should be looking for less ratepayer equity funding and more debt funding. But that's my parting thought, and if you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. And Mr. Chairman, thank you, and members.
And excuse me, I just wanted to bring up that as Jamie began to mention, some of those large spikes in cash that you saw are actually a result of bond monies that we had received and simply not spent yet.
Sure.
So that's not really a result of receiving in, ratepayer money and holding it for future I mean, we do try to, balance our capital needs between, our debt and our rates. But I just wanted to mention that, and you bring up a lot of great comments. Thank you.
Well, if we really wanted no ratepayer funding, we'd create a balancing account, and the rates would change every month and go up and down, and people would get ridiculous fluctuations in their bills, yeah. Darren?
Yeah, Darren Schultz, if I might just add, the lumpiness term, I like that, and we've used it a lot today. But it really has to do with the capital side of things. That's really where you're seeing those swings. And if you go back in previous years and it shows our capital, some years as 1 million or 2 million. But if you went back and you looked at what we budgeted for that year, it would be 4 or 5 million. So once you start doing that a number of years, and especially the last 3 years, including COVID and various things, it's just that big bump has just carried forward. And so it looks out of whack, but as soon as we finish up a whole handful of projects, that's going to go way down. That's going to come off the sheet again, and then we start clearly. So I think it's important that we realize that lumpiness is really just on the capital side, and that's due to projects. We would like to budget them, design them, and build them all in the same year, because then the books would look perfect. But we know that doesn't happen. And as those, especially the last 3 years, as they've kind of all bunched up. And then the other thing, I just wanted to clear up what Jamie was alluding to. So we are, that revenue that we are collecting based off of developer funds that are coming in, we are specifically setting that aside. That's going into that cash balance with the idea that at the WRF, when we have to do our next project to build it bigger, not change the technology, not change infrastructure that's worn out, but when we actually have to build it bigger because we have more flow coming in, we want that cash to be sitting there, that development put there to build that. So that's the goal of that carry forward, and it's building over time so that, 8-10 years from now, when we estimate we have to build that next size up, there will be substantial cash sitting there that we don't have to go back to rates for.
I think you make a very good point there about the difference between ongoing operating expenses and capital expenditures, and the nature of utilities, whether it's electrical systems, roads, water, sewers, wastewater, et cetera, natural gas. The nature is that they are very capital-intensive industries, all of them. And that's why it's hard to put them in a competitive framework and let the market work. That's why we either socialize them, our enterprise funds, or regulate them, the electric and gas, et cetera. And I appreciate that. My goal is just to see how nicely we can even out those things so that basically the enterprise is carrying the risk of financing of capital projects, and the ratepayers are paying the recovery of those costs. And that's why I raised that. And you're right, the last 3 years have thrown a monkey wrench into everything. I thank you all.
Okay, other questions from the committee? I had just a couple of follow-up questions. On the salaries and benefits increase, Jamie, there's I believe there's a 10%, I saw someone here, a 10% increase in benefits, either budgeted for or how it already occurred. And I was just curious as to what and I believe you said that OPEB was involved in that, but is health insurance anywhere near under control? Because I've been struck in looking at these the last couple of years, and this is not just Public Works, this is citywide, I'm sure. But a 10% increase per year in health insurance is just unsustainable, in my opinion. And I don't know how you make that track with all the effort that this committee and Public Works has put into getting all of these enterprises on a sustainable basis, where we're only looking at rate increases roughly tracking inflation. But could you sort of break down that 10%?
Well, so the 10% that is what we budgeted for the group insurance to go up. We don't know if that's necessarily what it will be, but to budget conservatively, that was the amount that we used. We also were notified of a PERS rate change, and that's really the one that's going to hit us the hardest. It's a fairly large increase. And so that increase that you see to salaries and benefits is really from that,
Okay.
and the 10% to the health insurance.
And then I just had one further question, and it had to do with, yeah, I guess it was on, what was this chart? The bar chart and line chart, wastewater fund financial policies. Correct, 19 of the materials. I thought I heard you say on system reinvestment funding, the goal is to have funding equal to 80% of depreciation. Did I hear that right?
I think I may have.
Yeah, I think,
I think I just misspoke.
yeah,
I think it's
that
supposed to
should
be
be trending
depreciation.
towards 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, it started, we were at 80 before we did the last rate study.
I-
And that was one of the goals in that rate study was to transition to 100% over the 4 years.
I believe I just had that 80 left in my notes from prior years.
Okay.
I apologize.
That number was there for a while.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Any further questions? Okay. And I believe that was, let's see. 5B. That was not an action item. I believe there's no action item here, so.
No, there is, you're supposed to recommend or not recommend it to go to the Board of Supervisors, I believe.
And this is Adam Tully, Deputy District Attorney. Just as a heads up, on packet page 14, you'll see the staff report, which includes a proposed motion on the action item.
Mr. Chairman, 5B says for possible action, et cetera, and a recommendation to the board. And as the person who oppressed our staff the most today, I'd like to move that the staff report and budget be forwarded to the Board of Supervisors with our recommendation for approval.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a question.
Yep. Go.
Do they need to read the proposed motion that's on page 14 in the center of the page?
They don't need to, but it might be helpful because it also there's also certain findings that this body's encouraged to make as part of their recommendation.
I'm sorry, what was the essence of that?
It's okay. I'll go ahead and read it for you.
Okay.
I move to acknowledge that the tentative wastewater fund budget for fiscal year 2024 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative wastewater fund budget for fiscal year 2024.
That's what I said.
And with that clarification, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. And I have now managed to find the same language for the water, looking for it, but, so I'm ready. Okay, moving on to item 5C for possible action, discussion, possible action regarding the tentative fiscal year 2024 water fund budget. Its compliance with adopted financial policies and a recommendation of the Board of Supervisors regarding the tentative water fund budget for fiscal year 2024.
Okay, Jamie Stevenson, Accounting Manager for the record. For the water fund, as with the wastewater fund, we've included our expected rate changes effective July 1st of 2023. Our salaries and benefits increased $124,828 over estimated 2023 with those contractual increases and those anticipated benefit increases. However, I do have a change that I'll be making to this fund as well for the same reason. Expected promotions of employees expected to receive new certifications next year. That amount will be $50,986. That will be added to salaries and benefits expenses. So that will increase our salaries and benefits $182,941 instead of the $124,000 on the slide. I've included that increase in the financial goal calculations, and we still meet all of our financial goals. Our services and supplies decreased a little bit, $38,971. We had increases to our internal service charges, but we also had decreases that were slightly, or that were larger to our other funds, professional service, Douglas Water Purchase, and our internal service charges for radios that kind of offset that increase. So we had a small decrease. Our capital spending for the water fund is $3,715,000. Here is a list of the 5-year planned capital.
Mr. Chairman, I have exactly 2 questions. Okay, they're on this page with the water fund highlights.
Yep, Mr. Connect, let's wait until we get done with the presentation, and then
Okay.
we'll circle back to this page.
Okay.
And for our financial policies, the 2024 water fund budget meets all of the city's adopted financial policy requirements. That spike you see in the gray capital reserve bar in 2022 represents an increase in cash due to the receipt of bond monies we received late in fiscal year 2022 for use on the Quill treatment plant. Those funds are currently being spent, and any remaining funds will roll forward into next year's budget during our augmentations. Industry standards for the water fund require an operating reserve of 60 to 90 days minimum of operating expenses. That's different than the wastewater fund, which is 30 to 45 days. And that concludes my presentation on the water fund.
Okay, questions from the committee members? Mr. Bathgate.
So simple question on page 35, the water fund financial policies, you said it met all of the requirements. Has it ever happened that you have not met those requirements, and what would happen?
You know the history.
It has happened in past years where we have not met all of our financial goals, and we always seek to reach those goals. So when that happens, we evaluate what our situation is and seek to get it back in balance again.
So it's just sort of a guideline. Excuse me. It's not something drastic must be done if you fail to meet these requirements.
Yeah, it's our city policies.
Okay.
Yeah, so we always seek to meet our city policies for sure.
Okay. Thanks.
Do you have a further question? Ms. Terzak? Mr. Dons? Mr. Connect?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Something I've asked about in the past is the Douglas Water Purchase. I have friends down there who don't don't particularly like, especially all around the county, don't particularly like what Minden has done. Are we pretty secure that they cannot interrupt that contract, or are we pretty sanguine that we will continue to get the water from Douglas and at a contract price?
Yeah, Eddie Quagliari, Water Utility Manager. Good to see you, Ron. We have a contract with Town of Minden. It's a perpetual contract, and there's a 10-year clause in that contract if anyone wants to negate the contract. So there's a 10-year period that we have to go into of warning if someone wants to get out of the contract. So it's a fairly secure agreement in our minds.
Are there force majeure or other provisions in the contract that might interrupt it before a 10-year notice?
I'm not aware of the exclusions in it and everything, but I don't know if Darren knows. I do know that there's the 10-year time frame.
Darren Schultz, for the record, yes, there are force majeure provisions in there. They're pretty major. I mean, otherwise we wouldn't have agreed to it. But yes, there is an outlet clause for certain acts of God and extreme type of things, but certainly not something that Eddie and I stay up at night thinking that could happen. So
6 months ago, you might have, but after the last 6 months of water, things look better. My other question is on radios. Are there any possible economies, and I don't know that there would be, but when I dealt with radio systems as a member of the State Board of Transportation overseeing NDOT, we were dealing with high radio costs and how to integrate various systems and use new technology. Is there anything we could do with the Sheriff's Department or anybody else to mitigate or stabilize our radio costs?
We already do work with Public Works controls the radios and manages the radio system for the sheriff and fire.
Okay.
So we already find that economy of scale there through sharing resources.
Scale and scope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions from the committee?
I have one more quick one.
Mr. Bathgate.
Thank you. Regarding personnel, it seems fairly common as you look around now that a lot of businesses are limiting hours because they cannot even find people to fill jobs. Do you guys see anything like that? Has that affected you at all?
Eddie Quagliari for the record again. I've seen personally our interview lists drop, interviewees. It's, for a meter tech job, entry-level job, we used to get, 60, 80 applicants, and now we're seeing maybe 20. So it's definitely been limited. We haven't struggled too much keeping people, but people have moved on, and mostly what we've been seeing, I'll go over my PowerPoint, is just retirements. That's been most of the vacancies created. So I guess to answer your question, yes, we've seen a drop in applicants.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. When you were looking at the Douglas water purchase and you had the decrease, is that just from the fact that you guys have sufficient supply and don't need to draw as much? On page 33. Oh, the agreement cost.
The agreement cost went down.
How convenient. My other question. So, talking about personnel costs, how do you feel your salaries are in comparison to other agencies? Are you losing, so you're not losing very many people to other agencies as much?
We did lose one water operator to Tumwa, and we'll actually go through that kind of
Okay.
benchmarking in our slides. So good question. We're going to do a comparison on our percentages.
Last call, any further questions? Okay, and do we have a motion in the form of the one presented on page 30 of the materials?
I move to acknowledge that the tentative water fund budget for fiscal year 2024 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative water fund budget for fiscal year 2024.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Moving to item 5D on the agenda for possible action, discussion, possible action regarding the tentative fiscal year 2024 stormwater utility fund budget, its compliance with adopted financial policies and a recommendation of the Board of Supervisors regarding the tentative stormwater utility fund budget for fiscal year 2024.
Jamie Stevenson, Accounting Manager for the record. For our stormwater utility fund, our operating revenues include our scheduled rate increases effective July 1st of 2023, our salaries and benefits with our contractual increases and our expected increases to benefits increased by $54,071. For this fund, I will also be making that addition for the employees who will be getting certifications next year. I plan to add $7,124 to the salaries and benefits expenses. So our total increase will actually be $61,195 instead of the $54,000 you see here. I included that increase in our financial goal calculations, and we still meet all of our goals. Our services and supplies had an increase of $41,000, and that is a result of higher internal service charges. Capital outlay is going to be $1,599,000. I would like to point out that this fund is starting to see the benefit of the rate increases. Last year, we could only afford $505,000 in capital spending and still meet our financial goals. But this year, we were able to plan $1,599,000 and still meet the goals. And here is the listing of those capital projects over the next 5 years. And for our financial policies, the stormwater utility fund budget for 2024 meets all the city's adopted financial policy requirements. Industry standards for operating reserve is 45 days for this fund. That concludes my presentation on stormwater fund. Are there any questions?
Questions from the committee?
I have a question.
Sure.
In 2026 and 2027 for the west drainage improvements, do you guys have a funding source for those projects?
That would be if those do proceed, those will be ones we look at bonding
Okay.
to do that.
Mr. Knecht?
This will be your toughest question of the day. At page 54, we show 4.35 positions, and the other two comparable pages show 23.9 and 26.9. And if my mental arithmetic is right, that's something like 55.15 positions total. I can imagine how you all can share positions. I can imagine how people could work a part of a year. Who is the heroic 0.15 position? You don't have to answer that if you don't want to.
No, those are our splits on, like Courtney, our accounting side. For example, for the stormwater, that's 10% of her time and positions like that do a lot of different things, so a lot of different funding sources.
Accountants do all kinds of magic.
Further questions from the committee? And I have no questions. Do we have a motion on this agenda item?
I move to acknowledge that the tentative Stormwater Utility Fund budget for fiscal year 2024 is in compliance with the adopted financial policies, and to recommend that the Board of Supervisors approve the tentative Stormwater Utility Fund budget for fiscal year 2024.
Thank you, and I'll be happy to second that because I didn't have to read all of it.
We have a motion to second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Unanimous? Motion carries. Let's see. Item 5E, for discussion only, discussion presentation concerning personnel projects and planning related to Carson City utilities. Mr. Schultz is going to, or this is going to be, excuse me. Andy.
Yes, this will be the Andy and Eddie show.
All right.
Yes.
Yep.
Good.
Again, for the record, Andy Hummel, wastewater utility manager. So for this last item, we wanted to kind of do a thorough overview of the three utilities, water, wastewater, and stormwater. Kind of what we've been up to, what those systems generally look like, what it is we do on a daily basis, that kind of stuff. Since Eddie took the lead on putting this together, it starts on the water, so I will turn it over to him.
And he went first last time for the budget presentation, so. Eddie Collier for the record, water utility manager. Like Andy said, we're gonna be doing our normal overview. This time, we're gonna go into a little more detail, just because it's been so long. New members on the board, even though Ron Johns worked for the utility, so we wanted to go into a little more depth on what our systems entail and our staffing and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be a little longer, but feel free to ask questions as we're going or at the end. And we'll get started here. Everyone always asks, like, how are we doing this year? Are we out of the drought? I kind of want to start off with that question. How wet is this year? It's very wet. This is the Carson River Basin hydrology you're looking at. We are the purple line or the purple shadowed area show the maxes, the max amount of snow water equivalent. So inches of water in the snowpack. And that can vary. If it's a dry snowpack, it's not a lot of water. So this is a good tell of how much water is sitting up there on the hills. You can see our black line is out there. It's making new maximums. We'll see if we get over that 2017. I think we will. And you can see that curve pushed out by the 1983 year. So really interesting, really telling to show that we're sitting pretty happy up there on the mountain. Next, drought. Are we still in a drought? Technically, by the drought monitor and this really accurate graph you're looking at of our state, we're out of the drought in the none category. I've, in years working in the water industry and resources, haven't seen too many counties in that none intensity that you're seeing. We're just barely on the outside though. So it just goes to show that, we're usually in some sort of level of drought with brief periods of wet times that we're in right now. So You know, a lot of that has to do with the soil moisture, and there's different, you know, things that they're measuring, and takes you a while to get out of those drought stages. But this is looking very, very good. Most of the state in that moderate dry, abnormally dry period. So just wanted to show that and answer those questions right off, because it's always the first questions people ask, seems to be. So getting to the water system overview here, this might be a repeat for some of you, but wanted to still go over it. 350 miles of pipeline, 16 different separate pressure zones, and you can look at those as almost different water systems combined into one. They're all intertied, but they're almost separate. 13 booster pump stations, 16 storage tanks, 60 PRVs. We're about a 75% groundwater to 25% surface water system. We'll be going over the Quill project. I'm hoping to move that more to, you know, higher percentage of surface water to rest our groundwater. We have one arsenic treatment plant for our 2 groundwater wells. We also utilize blending throughout the town for arsenic, uranium. It's the cheapest way to treat the water. So we blend better sources with higher sources, and we get below the MCLs for that. Surface water is composed of Ash, Kings, Marlette. We also have 2 river induction wells. So those are 2 wells in Riverview Park, wells 41 and 25. They are good producers, and they actually use Carson River rights to account for the groundwater pumping. They're very unique wells, and we use them. And we also talked about the interconnections. We have interconnection with town of Minden and Douglas through the transmission main that we just discussed. We also have an emergency connection with Lyon County up over Highway 50 tank. We get about 5 MGD from the town of Minden from the interconnection there. The next slide shows our water resources portfolio and water rights portfolio. I'm not going to go through each one of these, but it shows you just all the inputs coming into our system from a resource perspective, including Andy's effluent reuse, which offsets our water, potable water system for the golf courses and the prison farms. If you go through these, they do add up to the 18,000. I've checked it a few times. But that's our total, you know, system water resource amount, including surface water. I don't include in that the Marlette Lake water system rights, because those are not owned by us. That's just that 18,000 you see in the middle is just water rights we own as a city. It doesn't include leased water. The Lost Lake and Mud Lake are leased water from CWSD. Next slide, just wanted to give you an update on the water system demands and show an interesting graph. So for calendar year 22, we were close to 18 MGD. Our average winter demand was 5.8. For some perspective, this year our winter demand's been 3 to 4, just due to all the moisture we're getting that we just talked about. A good year for water loss. We was down by 3%. You know, for a utility, 15% is considered decent. So we're doing very well on water loss. We see a leak, we fix it right away. We don't let anything go. So, and then the graph below, I'll explain this a little bit and why I added it. It's counterintuitive. It's kind of a head scratcher. How is population increasing while metered usage is decreasing? So the bars you see in that trend line is the total metered usage. It's not production, it's metered. The green line is the population data. Now, the best description or, you know, explanation is conservation, smarter water use, people zero-scaping their properties. Rate increases also play a factor in this. We've had, you know, a series of rate increases over the last 10 years. So that's why we're showing the inverse relationship. One interesting thing on this graph is that year 21, these are fiscal years. So that was right smack in the dead of COVID. And we did see an increase, which was interesting. And then it came back down the next year as people went back to work and weren't at home, doing their gardening and whatever else they were doing. Next slide shows literally our pennies on the dollar. That phrase, goes around. I saw this on Tumwa's Instagram post, and I thought, hey, what does ours look like? So Courtney got voluntold to put this together. And it's an interesting way to show our budget. If you look at it, I guess the only difference is some of them are dead on with Tumwa's percentages. The ones that pop out are the capital rehab and maintenance and the employee salaries. Those are different. Our employee salaries are 9% of our dollar, and theirs are 21%. And then their capital rehab and maintenance is 20% on Tumwa's and then 37 on ours. So that's where the difference split is. So that's just wanted to share that with everybody. This is our org chart. Nothing crazy here. Just wanted to show you the water system's broken up in production and distribution. We have meters under distribution. Just wanted to show you the 20 employees in the water division. Now we do share, like we've already touched on, we share resources, Andy and I, with environmental controls. They do all of our water sampling and our tracking and a lot of our regulatory water quality stuff. So that's a shared efficiency. And then we also share utility billing. So we're getting efficiencies there too. With the same people that do the wastewater, stormwater, and water are the same people in utility billing. Amongst other places too. Those aren't the only two, but just wanted to point that out. Water projects. So going to go through this. I go through this every time. I'm going to do a deeper dive into Quill and then another PRV project we just did because Quill is obviously the big thing going on in the water system right now. We're upgrading that treatment plant to get more surface water into our system. But current water projects in construction, we've done 3 fairly significant well rehabs this winter. Well 24, well 48, and well 53. The only one we're waiting on, 24 and 53 are done. The only one we're waiting for is 53, 48 equipment to come in. We've been doing some upgrades to our wells, adding epoxy drop pipe. We've been changing from food grade oil cooled bearings on the shafts, drive shafts to water cooled. So those are some upgrades we're doing to our vertical turbine pumps as we go through, which will pay off in the long run. Paradise View, a pressure regulating station replacement. We just did that Sunday night. Still a little sleepy from that, but I'm going to go through that next, show you some pictures of it. Current water projects in design, Prison Hill Booster Pump Station, that's replacing 2 subgrade booster pump stations down in the southeast of town. We're going to replace both of those with 1 above ground packaged booster pump station. A lot easier to maintain and access and safer and more resilient. We're also doing a big project. Andy and I are sharing a project for well 38. That well suffers from nitrate levels, and the only way to treat it other than adding treatment to it is to pump that well. So we're building a new flush to waste line to the prison farms, and we're going to offset, instead of using effluent water, we're going to offset it with well water to treat that well and try to bring down the nitrates down. So it's kind of it's a cool joint project we're working on. So Quill, I'll jump into Quill. We're at 90% review or design right now. I say it's done, but we're moving towards 90% design review. We've chosen a UV vendor. We've gone with Trojan UV. We put that out to bid. Filters, the package filtration system is out to bid right now. So we're soliciting that. And we're getting ready to solicit the electrical and the motor control centers soon. We got to get this equipment. We had to pre-procure it so it shows up when we time it with the construction. So, electrical equipment's out about 18 months. So it makes doing projects very challenging if you can't start up the project when you're done with it. So Paradise View, PRV, this was just done Sunday night. This one valve assembly you're looking at, which regulates pressure, took out water, pressure, and supply to about 1,000 homes downstream it. So it was a very critical project. We've been in planning for about a year now for it. We had to take it out, put the new one in. But to do that, we had to shut off about 100 homes on the meters. We had to monitor pressures all the way down Timberline. If any of you lived up there, you got noticed a bunch of times for this. We got delayed once last month for snow and storms. So we got it done. It was definitely a measure 100 times and cut once kind of job, as you can see when you're doing this. But the crews did awesome, and we got it done in our time frame. Moving on to Quill. So this just shows you the Quill water sources. You could see there Ash and Marlette combined in one pipeline below the Ash Pond. That's up in Ash Canyon. That's the concrete lined pond up there. And then we have a second source from Kings Creek. And then above Ash Pond is the whole Marlette Lake water system source. You can see a lot of infrastructure, a lot of piping. We pump out of Marlette, flows into Hobart, and then it comes all the way down this long pipeline to us. At the Lakeview tanks there, that's where it splits to Virginia City. So that's where the siphon begins. Just wanted to go over that real quick. And then moving on to the Quill, the actual water treatment plant design. This is a sketch right now of the layout. We are expanding the building about 40 feet out. And we actually were able to save that cost by not cutting the interior concrete of the existing building. We moved all the piping, all those dashed lines you see at the right side of those filter boxes. Those are all outside the building right now. So we can build that whole system, the wet well, before we build the expansion. And it was equitable to do that, to expand the building versus cutting the existing floors and putting those all in. So just wanted to show this layout. We're moving towards conventional treatment, flocculation, sedimentation, gravity filtration, and then UV disinfection on the back end. The UVs there on the left, it's kind of hard to read that, but it's in there in the spaghetti bowl there. And we're looking to go to construction late this year. That's the plan. So this just shows the next slide, Andy. If you go to two more, it'll show the. Okay, there you go. The red, you didn't see in the other slide, but it had have a purple box on there that shows that building expansion. This is what the building will look like. The bottom picture on the bottom left shows the wet well, so that's where the filtered water will go into, and then we'll pump it back up through the UV. That's where the filtered water tank will be. And then the bottom just shows the chemical room and the piping and how that all goes out into that new building footprint. So we'll build all that before we put the building on top. Next slide. This is, what's the need for Quill? It's got a lot of needs. For one, we're only treating about 1 MGD. That's the maximum we can run this plant due to water quality that we're getting. And it's not that the water is not treatable. It's just our treatment plant right now can't get it to the standards we need to get it to in an efficient way. We get into, short cycling our filters, more backwashing than water we're creating. So you get into a deficit situation if you try to treat some of the waters we're getting. It's 30 years old. It was designed for 4.5 MGD. We could only get one, as I said. The existing is direct filtration with diatomaceous earth, no pretreatment. Our new filters will have the pre-Floxed treatment, that's pretreatment, and then it'll go into a filtration. not able to treat most of our surface waters, as we've talked about. You know, our limit right now is about 6 units of turbidity, that's cloudiness in the water. That's where we just turn out our sources. In the future with our nutrient plant, we're gonna go up to, you know, the max is 70 or 100. So you can see the fold increases there. And then this graph is really telling to me. It shows the amount of our source water that we've been treating. And so an average on the right side of that table, you know, we're treating 20 to 40% of the raw water that we could be treating. So that just goes to show how limited this plant has been. We also, another benefit I'd like to add to this is we recharge our wells in the wintertime with this water. So we're treating, you know, surface water in the winter, and not all of it gets used because our demands are low. We re-inject that into a number of wells. Those wells are high in uranium. We can bring down that uranium level. We can actually treat the groundwater in the ground with surface water. So it actually, just for relative sake, a well that we could only run one month out of the year due to uranium, when we do our recharge, we can run it 2 to 3 months. And that gets us through, you know, our peak summer demand. So it's a very important and helpful program. Okay, so my last slide. So this is going back to our water updates that we started on, and I'm going to go over our water studies and our staffing. Some current water studies we're working on. Where, you know, I presented last time on the lead and copper, new revised lead and copper rule we have to comply with. That deadline is October 16th, 2024. And we're making progress on building our database, which includes the utility side, service lateral, and the property owner private service lateral side. We have to document what those are comprised of. And this is all coming out of the Flint, Michigan issue. EPA has revised that. It's a big jump for us. You know, we have to now determine what the customer's pipes are. So we're done with our side of the meter, and we're moving towards asking the public and going out and looking at the public side. So that's another big push. We're updating our Carson City source water protection plan. The last one was, last time I was updated was in 2014. We're embarking on a water model update, and that will lead into our water resource plan update that was done in 2018. The last time we updated our water model in any significant way was in 2015, so it's due for an update. Another cool thing we started was we got 25 AMI meter transponders. So what we can do is right now we're AMR, which is the truck reading. The truck drives around, reads the routes, not like Ron used to do by hand. Truck gets the routes, and then we upload it to our billing. The AMI is a cell, basically like a cell phone at the meter that transmits that signal right to our billing. So we've gotten 25 of those transponders, and we're testing them out. And if they work well, which I think they will, we'll start buying those. And so as we replace them, we'll replace them with AMI. It uses the same meter body. It's just the transmitter that you have to change out. So they have a higher cost because you have to pay a higher monthly cost on them, but saves a lot of time. And then follow our well rehab program that we recently completed, scheduling all of our well rehabs, and our tank rehab program that schedules out all of our tank rehabs that we've done or that we're going to do. And then staffing. So Tom Grundy retired March 1st this month, and he was with us for about 4 years in the water system, 20 years with the city. Working on water projects. So that was a big loss to us, but good for him. Joe Reyna now took over his position as water operations supervisor. Jim Estes, a seasoned production foreman, took over Joe's position. So we're playing backfills here, and then we're interviewing for a new production operator vacated by Jimmy's position. So other than that, no major changes to staffing. And with that, I'll take any questions or kick it off to Andy for his presentations.
Let's take questions now while we're on water here.
Sure, yeah.
Eddie, questions from the committee? Mr. Connect?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the Eddie and Andy show for upholding the tradition of engineers as being the most entertaining group. This is always the most fun part of our meetings, and I say that as someone who has been a registered professional engineer in that state over the hill for 37 years. You guys did a great job. You did a great job too, by the way. My question is a very serious one. Well, first of all, can you email us your presentations?
Yeah, sure.
We appreciate them, and we'll go over them and call you up with some questions.
A little nighttime reading, yeah.
Yeah, I go to sleep on stuff like that. Anyway, my other question is on the outlook for Carson, for this whole Sierra front, and for that matter, for the state and the whole Colorado basin. Do you know of any reports that are coming through, or when you see some, could you forward those that basically incorporate the experience of this water year and update all of the horror stories we've been living on for the last 5 years about water prospects? I would make good use of that if you could, and just let me know what you see, what you know, and preferably if you got a copy, forward one.
Yeah, there's a good email brief that comes out from the USDA, and I believe the NRCS that kind of gives you the overview, the water supply forecast, and it does it. The graph I show was for Carson River Basin because that's where we are. It does the whole state, so it gives you all the info you're looking for. I can show you how to sign up for that.
Please, and for that matter, like I said, if you got anything that covers the whole Colorado River Basin as well as here, that'd be helpful. And again, thank you guys, and keep up the good work.
Sure thing.
Other questions? I had a couple. Eddie, just on MLWS, what does that stand for?
Marlette Lake Water System.
Oh, trying to figure out.
Sorry, I probably breezed over that.
And is that city-owned pipe from the point of diversion at the bottom of the siphon here? Or I guess it's the top of the siphon, right?
So it's all state-owned to that ash pond. That's that fenced-off concrete line basin up at Ash Canyon that people park around to go hiking. Right. That's kind of the point of connection. You see it, it's a little dot right there by ash diversion. It's that ash pond. So from at Ash Pond, that's all of our pipeline to Quill. Okay. So we're in charge of a small portion of that.
Okay.
And so we wholesale water from the Marlette Lake water system. And
with respect to the 75-25, I think that was a split of groundwater, surface water. The problem with the problem with the existing treatment plant was that it related both to Ash Canyon, Kings Creek water and the Marlette Hobart system.
Yes.
And that had to do with organics in the water or something?
Yeah, so it's just limited with the turbidity. The turbidity is the overarching kind of limitation, but there's other, there's other things that we could go over, which you guys probably don't want to, but I would love to.
That's kind
I'm holding myself back from.
As I recall, it had to do with
deep dive.
Meeting safe drinking water standards at the end of the pipes or something, because starting with treatment issues. But
yeah, there's a whole slew of them.
Okay, and so with the new treatment plan, that's going to shift that 75-25 split of groundwater and surface water?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll be at 6 MG, if the resource is there to produce 6 MGD, we'll be able to make 6 MGD of water. And you saw our peak demand in the summer is around 18, 19. So,
And then I was fascinated on the reinjection of surface water to treat groundwater. You're reinjecting treated water
yeah, we're reinjecting our surface water from Quill that's treated.
after, wow.
Yep, and those wells are off in the winter, and we reverse that pressure down them.
Same pumps.
It doesn't use pumps, it just uses
gravity.
system pressure, yeah. It's like a backwards well. And so, and on the 7525, we'll also be getting 2 or 3 from our MGD from our river induction wells. Those are technically surface water, so I'm including that in. That's included into our surface water side, not our groundwater side. So it's both Quill and then the 2 induction wells.
And then the water from Douglas County is also surface water.
That's groundwater.
That's groundwater.
Yes.
Those are all the questions I had. Any?
Chairman, I thought of one other while you were talking. You mentioned the water flow to Virginia City. Is that still through the old cast iron pipe that's over 100 and however many years old?
Yeah, there is still some of the riveted pipe in the ground that's serving Virginia City.
And what are the prospects of that holding out? Because there's a lot of head on that
Yep.
pipe.
700
And it's-
PSI.
Huh?
700 PSI at the
Yeah,
bottom.
so
They've done some replacements. They've replaced the sections under the highway, which is, probably the most important part. But going up Duck Hill, it sometimes leaks and it's not good. Yeah.
amazing engineering and
Yeah.
construction.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, I believe that concludes report from water.
Yeah.
Andy, your turn.
Yeah, we'll jump into the wastewater side here. So as far as infrastructure on the wastewater system, we've got just under 240 feet of pipeline. About 80% of that is actually the smallest 8-inch. So that'd be typically the size of pipe that's running in front of your house, essentially the bulk of our collection system. To get it to our wastewater plant, what can't be gravitied, we have to pump. So we have 5 sewage lift stations throughout the city. And those, between gravity and those sewage lift stations, bring about 5 million gallons every day to our water resource recovery facility or wharf out on 5th Street. Of that 5 million gallons per day, we are a 100% reuse facility. So during the winter, all that water is getting pumped up. We have a storage reservoir up in Brunswick, kind of the right side of that image there. About 3,000 acre feet. We use about a maximum of 50% of that storage at this point. And then in the summer, we have 4 sites around town that use that water for irrigation. The prison farm in the south end of town is our largest customer. We have Empire Ranch Golf Course, Eagle Valley Golf Course, and Silver Oak Golf Course. And then as far as, like Eddie mentioned, he has the water intertie. We do receive a small amount of flow from Douglas County. The Clear Creek Golf Course community does send us some flow. Up until last year, we also got the flow from the Topsy Lane commercial area, the Walmart, Best Buy, that area. But they've expanded their system that goes to their treatment plant down there to take that off of our system. As far as wastewater treatment, at the last several years, kind of showing our trends, we've been slowly trending downwards on our average daily flow. 2020, we were about 4.9, and then this last year, we were just under 4.8. To date, for this year, with all the rain and everything we've seen, we're actually about 6.3. We do tend to be higher in the spring and then it drops off in the summer. That flow rate tends to be influenced over time. It'll slowly go up due to growth, but soil moisture has a pretty big impact. Basically infiltration into the system as the groundwater comes up, just little leaks into manholes and around pipe joints and stuff. Kind of a death by 1,000 paper cuts type thing. Every little pinhole adds up. Water rate costs do also kind of drive that flow rate. As water costs more, people will use less around their house, and that results in less coming to me. The other interesting one I wanted to show that kind of illustrates really the drought as well, our peak day flow. That's kind of the most we saw in one day that we processed at the plant. 2020, we were just under 6 million gallons a day on a peak day. And then 21 and 22, we had a couple of big storms in those years, a little bit over 7 MGD that we processed on those. And then this year, this was a week and a half ago or so, that big storm there, we did a day at 9.66. The plant is permitted to do 6.9 million gallon day average. Our peak day flow by permit is 9.5. So we've let the state know, hey, in order to keep this off the streets, we're running as hard as we can out there, and been in conversations with them. That is actually a little lower than what we did in 2017. We saw about 9.9 was our peak day in 2017. So that was kind of one of their questions is, with that higher flow rate we're seeing this spring, that's the infiltration issue. It'll probably be something they'll ask us to look at in the future. The preliminary numbers I've looked at comparing us to 2017, even though with growth and more people connected, our numbers this year are actually slightly lower on average than 2017. So, all the work we've been doing replacing old pipe, things like that leaked more has been helping. So, and then I threw at the bottom there just kind of roughly, how many million gallons we treat every year, just under 2,000 million gallons a year. So we do treat to a Class B standard is what in the state regs, what they consider. So that's suitable for irrigation usage with minimal human contact. So have your signs out warning people, hey, the site is irrigated with it, try to water at night, those kind of things. But, it's suitable to put on a golf course or something like that. Was at a conference a little bit this morning. Orange County was there. They've done a pretty extensive, one of the largest in the world, I think, at this point, potable reuse projects where they're treating to a very high standard and then allowing that to either percolate into the ground or injecting it into groundwater wells. And they had a slide up of one of their storage ponds where they're doing that infiltration, and they also use it as a water park. So people can go out there and float around and swim in it and everything else. So don't know if we're quite there yet for here. So yeah, that kind of a little bit of silence in the crowd when she put that one up. As a big part of what we do on the wastewater side, everything is buried under the ground and hard to see. You can't really tell you have a leak. Eddie starts seeing a pressure drop, he's got a leak, or it shows up at the surface pretty quickly. But on my side, everything being gravity, it's a little more difficult. So one of the things that we went to the last couple of years is using a sonar technology. That's the picture there at the bottom, to do a rapid assessment. It's pretty quick. We were able to do roughly half the city last year in just under 2 months. They're out there right now doing the other half. They just started last week. Basically one device in one manhole and one in the next, and makes a series of tones and tells how blocked that section is. And then anything that's blocked or close to, that's what the sewer crews need to get out and prioritize as far as cleaning and inspecting. So then that drives any maintenance needs we are going to do, as well as any video inspection that they then go do with either our camera, or if we get enough to do, bring in a third party to do a large amount. One of the other things that we're just starting on at the treatment plant, looking at our standard operating procedures. Right now, it's pretty much a big, thick binder with a pretty large PDF file. We've got a consultant helping us break those down into the individual processes, make it easier to understand for the staff. So they're digitizing all that, and then we'll be able to QR code those. So staff, pretty much all the operators have a iPad that they walk around with as they go around their rounds. They'd be able to, as they walk into a building, picture that, the mechanics or the operators, and here's the various manuals that go with that, the startup procedures, whatever. So hopefully make their lives easier. And then another one, like Eddie mentioned, on the water side, we do modeling on the collection system to keep tabs on our capacity. We did a pretty extensive effort in 2017. Dan Stuckey here in the audience actually did that effort when he was on the private side, but we updated that this last year, did an update to keep tabs on growth and just keep that up to date. As far as projects, got a number of pipeline replacement projects in the works. We're looking at a small one on Nevada Street. We're just finishing up design, getting ready to bid a pretty extensive one, Eagle Station and Silver Stage, not stage there. That one's a fairly deep line. We're actually going to look at doing a pipe bursting on that rather than dig it up to hopefully reduce traffic impacts. We're scoping about $750,000 in cured in place pipe, or CIPP. That's the two pictures there. Basically invert a resin coated liner inside the pipe and then cures it and essentially rebuilds that pipe from the inside. William Street, we've got a portion of that. We're with the roadway project there. We're going to do some replacements closer to Carson Street area. And then I mentioned before, but the southeast area, we're in preliminary design on the next phase of that project. And then for the treatment plant projects out there, I mentioned we're finishing up the electrical upgrades. That's been a multi-year project. We're working on our dewatering building, revitalizing the odor scrubber in that building, and then some floor repairs in there. Headworks, we're going to rebuild screw pump number 4, basically our oldest one at this point. Our secondary effluent, our secondary clarifiers, the drain line that comes out of those to the next process. We're going to install a vent in that line, a relatively minor project, but one that its importance was pretty highlighted in these storms. It was kind of our limiting factor in how much water we could pump through the system. Basically that line just getting airlocked, and we could only put so much through it. And then our effluent main line up to Brunswick, we're going to do a bunch of air vacuum release valves, replace those. They've been in service since that line was constructed in the 80s. So get those replaced before they start failing. And then, like Eddie showed, the org chart on the wastewater side. So we have it sewer side. That's our field crews out on a daily basis. 7 people in there, basically going around doing the maintenance on the collection system, videoing, inspection, that kind of stuff. The treatment plant itself, we have a wastewater operations supervisor over there, and then 4 operators and 4 mechanics keeping that running. Environmental control that I can share with Eddie, as well as they help with the landfill. Any things that needed to be watched up there, but so they're kind of our pre-treatment program is their main focus. 4 environmental control officers there. We have the laboratory, and then part of why some of us are, 3/4 of a person. Facilities maintenance also falls under me, so that's a portion of my time that's out of general fund. Like Eddie wanted to show kind of the wastewater spending. Main difference between water and wastewater, the capital rehab maintenance is slightly higher on mine, but and then the debt service is a little lower, which was illustrated in the slides that Jamie showed as well, as far as the debt coverage. Any questions on wastewater before I jump into stormwater?
Questions from the committee? Let's go to stormwater.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me,
Mhm.
apologize.
Yeah,
One quick two-part question.
yeah.
With your nitrate flushing line to the prison farm, how do you anticipate that affecting your usage of effluent at the farm?
The last 2 years, we'd have loved to have it because the reservoir was getting low. And that was kind of when we came up with this idea was, much like Ron was pointing out earlier, that's not just the funds that are lumpy, it's water resources. In dry years, everybody is using more effluent for their irrigation and everybody's usage at home goes down. So we rely on the reservoir a lot more in those years. Levels just slowly tapered off. And we were looking at, hey, are there other sources, wells that, Eddie can't use that, if we needed them, we could bring into the effluent system on a temporary basis on those really dry years. And that's kind of where that nexus came in was, we have that well that is high in nitrates, and if we could pump it for several months and get that down, it benefits him. And on those drier years, benefits my side as well.
Thank you. And the second part is, do you anticipate the nitrate level in that well to drop as you expand your sewer system out?
It will help that source coming in, yes. We'll still have to pump it to get it out. But yeah, as that system goes in and that source goes away, yeah, that'll help that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I think we're ready for stormwater.
All righty. Okay, on the stormwater side, much smaller fund. We generate about $3 million a year in revenue, so that's, while a vast improvement over where we were just a couple of years ago. It does limit, got to be much more thoughtful and careful with the projects. Can't go after big stuff yet. So a big part of that project or program is, between permit compliance, we are an MS4, so municipal separate storm sewer system. So the sewer system and storm systems are separated. The storm system generally goes to the river. But with that, we have a permit through NDEP to monitor compliance on the stormwater side. So with that, on the staffing, we do have a stormwater program manager. That position turned over in the last couple of months. It was Rob Fellows for a long time. He retired, and now it is Brianna Greenlaw. She was the assistant on that side and has been doing a really good job. So she moved up into that role. So we have basically that program manager, an assistant program manager, and then several storm drain technicians. We are adding a third this year with the upcoming budget, probably after the first of the year, just for budgetary reasons, but that'll bring us to what was anticipated in the rate study when it was done. The other part of it is any system maintenance and then system, future capital needs. They're identifying those. And the big part of it this year has been kind of two events. They had the event at New Year's, and then also just a week or so ago here that they got a good education of what the Carson City stormwater system does in a big rain event. And both of those events, especially the New Year's event, was kind of the first time that we've really been tested since a lot of the infrastructure went in, like with South Carson Street. And a lot of the areas that we were anticipating problems just never showed up. So they, it did what it was supposed to do, and from a operational standpoint during those events made our lives much easier. Still a lot of work going on, but some of those past problems have been addressed, so we were very happy to see that. From the capital side, the kind of the big ones in our CIP, we've got William Street that will be occurring. There's a lot of storm drainage improvements there. And then one that's in this current year's budget that we actually just got, a replacement Vector. Literally was at the dealer in Reno getting its PDI done in this last event a couple of weeks ago that we were wishing it was a week ahead, but as our old one was, we're gonna leave it in this part of town and just let it do hopefully that, and it's leaking oil and stuff bad enough, we weren't sure it was gonna make it through, but we did. And then on the spending side, this one looks, yes,
Before
Yeah.
we leave that one.
yeah.
If you know, where was that picture taken?
That picture was last week. That's down Morgan Mill Park. Yeah, and you can just barely see it in the picture there. The sign on the right side, and there's kind of some white stuff at the base of it. It's a bunch of sandbags around one of my sewer manholes. So that was one of the areas of infiltration we were addressing during the event. We actually had 2 manholes in there. One of them is completely underwater that you can't even see, that they had to just put some plastic over it and bag over that, and yep.
And that's what most of Empire Ranch Golf Course looked like
Yeah.
on the same day.
Yep. Yep. And then stormwater, again, our kind of pennies on the dollar there. I think the big one, the employee benefits and salaries, is pretty consistent between the 3 funds, which I think is a good sign as far as, the people doing the work and in the right area as far as where they're getting paid out of. So, and then the capital rehab and maintenance, again, a little over 50% of the fund there is going towards that. So, spending the money where it's needed. And then kind of to close this out, I wanted to kind of review our rates. And for this committee, the utility rate study we completed in 2020, kind of right in the height of COVID, which definitely delayed that process. With that rate study, we reviewed the user fees on all 3 utilities. Water and wastewater, that was a much simpler look. Basically, we knew we were happy with the rate structure, didn't want to go in and mess with that. It was basically just, are the user fees appropriate for the needs of the utility? And based on those findings, all 3 of the utilities, it was ultimately decided a 4-year increase time period to phase those in rather than do it all immediately. Stormwater, for the most part, that one was all phased in over 3 years, and then one last category on that one, since we made some pretty big changes, will happen, the final one in 2024. But, so yeah, that first increase went in July 1st of 2021, and then the final one on those will be July 1 of 2024. And then in 2025 and subsequent years, user fees would be adjusted by the previous calendar year's CPI with a limit of 0 to 3%. So if CPI is higher than 3, the increase would be 3% max. Connection fees, those were largely set in 2013 for water and wastewater. Those adjust annually, again, that 0 to 3% range, but we use the Engineering News and Record Construction Cost Index. It's a little more indicative of actual costs of what it's that impact to building things. The stormwater fees, as I mentioned, that we did a lot more work on those as far as the methodology. Historically, we had 4 classes that were just based on zoning, residential, commercial, multifamily, things like that. And it had no basis on the size of the property or what their relative impact to the system. And that was one thing that the board really wanted to do, was get it more equitable. So we did basically 2 main classes and then based it on system impact. So single-family residential was one. We based that on square footage of the residents. It was kind of the easiest data we had. The assessor has that data. The bigger the house, the more area that it's covering that water can run off of. And then for the non-single-family residential, basically all the commercial type, the kind of everything else, that was based on impervious area groupings. So like 0 to a quarter acre would be 1, quarter acre to an acre, that kind of stuff. But ultimately, that user fee, we designed it to generate about $3 million a year in revenue, which we're in this will be our 3rd year coming up of that rate increase, and it's looking like we're going to be pretty close to that. So, and with that, any final questions?
Questions? I had one question, Andy, and
Yeah.
that had to do with the acceptance of the stormwater fee. I know when I first became involved with this oversight committee, that was sort of a new one for me. And I
Yeah.
think that was in that it didn't seem really related to water and sewer. How has that been accepted by Carson City residents, this new and fairly rapidly growing piece of their utility bill?
Yeah, after the last, winter we've had, it's a little more acceptable. Everybody sees why it's there. I mean, there's always the, if I don't have a catch basin in front of my house, why do I have to pay it argument? But, it's not just, what's happening in front of your house. It's the ability to go anywhere in town, really. And that's the main reason the board decided that it needed to be applied citywide is, if we can't get downtown because there's a bunch of flooding in that area, or can't get to shopping centers because the roads are flooded, that affects everybody.
And I
So it's
think I
been
saw
it's been pretty acceptable.
I think I saw Tumwa is just starting to do that.
Yeah, I know Reno is looking at it. They're going to do something similar to how we did it, based on impervious area. And then City of Sparks has had one for like 20 plus years, but they based it on a percentage of the sewer fee, was how they decided to do it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Knecht?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Eddie wins the contest for the best pictures,
Good.
but that's not because of
He
Eddie.
needs it.
That's because water is much more interesting
Yes.
than wastewater and stormwater. But my question is, do you know whether there are any plans to revisit the cost studies and rate design studies that that we're living on today? It'd be interesting to know that. I think it's improved in the last 20 years, but
Yeah, we're thinking it's a couple of years out. Once we get into that CPI indexing, we'll need to kind of take another look at that and just make sure everything is working the way it was designed.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you both. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you for those. Any further questions? Thank you for those presentations. And that concludes all of the subparts of item 5 on the agenda. Item 6, non-action items. Any future agenda items that anyone wants to tee up, or status reports and comments from staff or members of the committee? Hearing nothing, we'll move on to item 7, public comment. Are there any members of the public who would like to comment and present and address the committee at this time?
One thing that I would like to add, May 20th, we are doing Public Works Open House for Public Works Week. So if anybody wants to come down and kind of get a good overview of what Public Works does in its entirety, we'll be down there. Eddie and I will be having taste tests of our water products.
Andy
so-
volunteered to do a dunk tank in effluent water, actually. You can throw a ball at the little target, and he'll drop into the, I'll do it in the fresh water too, so totally volunteering
Yeah.
that. Yeah, but there'll be food trucks, there'll be our demonstrations, the kids can climb on the equipment, with means, but, so it's a fun day. We haven't done it since before COVID, so it's fun to bring it back.
Great. Thanks for bringing that up.
Can adults climb on the equipment? Because, I mean,
Only
otherwise
you,
I'm
Jim.
not going.
Only you can.
Thank you.
We'll let you.
All right. No, let the record reflect there's no further public comment. Item 8, adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
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 All right, motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.